Good morning and welcome to today's webcast, Transform Your ERP Workflows Using NetSuite AI Connector. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief housekeeping video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Our webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
And before we get started, I wanted to share our big news that Moss Adams and Baker Tilly have joined forces to redefine accounting, tax, and advisory services for the middle market. It's really exciting, and you can read more about it on our website via the link in the slide deck and handouts widget. And with that, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Chris Millet and Matt Dahse, leaders on our NetSuite Solutions team. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Great. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, I'm Chris Millet. I'm a director on our NetSuite team here at Moss Adams Baker Tilly. And we're really excited to be talking with everybody today about the new NetSuite AI Connector that many of you may have seen through LinkedIn posts or blogs or some of the promotional information that Oracle NetSuite has been putting out there. We've been getting a lot of interest and questions on our NetSuite team around this, and we're happy to share with you some more details about use cases, some of the ins and outs of what the AI Connector is best used for, and then also some things around safety too. That's one of the things that we're really focused on here at Moss Adams Baker Tilly, is just making sure that people are using these tools in the proper way and not getting themselves in trouble. So to start off here, we'll just give you a quick introduction around the NetSuite AI Connector. And to do that, we will talk a little bit about just an overview of some of the uses that the AI Connector can best be intended for and used for. First and foremost, one of the main enhancements here is around conversational ERP interactions. So what the connector allows you to do, and we'll be seeing much more of this as we go through the presentation, is it allows you to use natural language to interact with your NetSuite ERP. So you can ask questions and make queries about business transactions that are happening within the ERP. But do it in common language. So what that does is really simplifies the overall user experience. And we'll see some examples of this as we move further into the presentation. So one thing that you may have seen, or one term that you may have seen around the NetSuite AI Connector, is something called MCP. And what that stands for is Model Context Protocol, for those of us that aren't super technical. But what MCP facilitates is really an integration by structuring the data exchange between the AI agent and the ERP system for seamless operation. So it really allows that connection. So when you see the term MCP, that's what they're referring to. Model Context Protocol really allows for that communication to happen, to use that conversational language with and be able to interact with the data within the ERP. One thing we do like to call out currently, and these things are changing very quickly. In fact, you are probably, if you're paying attention, you may be seeing posts on LinkedIn daily or other avenues about updates to the connector and how it can work and some of the functions around it. But one thing we do want to call out is the current connector only supports Anthropic's Claude models, and that's Anthropic's AI agent, their large language model. And it does require a subscription to Claude Pro or another paid tier of Claude. Now, there has been a lot of talk out there and some announcements around being able to be interacted with a GPT or other large language models, but those are expected later. For now, as things stand currently today, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Anthropic's Claude model is the only model that the connector currently supports. Okay. And then some of the other enhancements here, we're going to have enhanced ERP accessibility. So again, kind of going along with the first part, being able to use that natural language processing reduces technical barriers for users. So it really just makes your ERP system more user-friendly, more efficient to interact with and to get information out. Some of the overall functional capabilities of the connector, those natural language data queries. So what, as a user, I can do is I can perform complex financial operational queries using natural language. So for instance, I can say, hey, I would like to understand what all of my sales revenue are across my business channels within a certain region. And using standard NetSuite, I would need to go in and build a report. I can certainly get that information, but I would have to understand how to build a report around that segmentation, where using natural language and interacting with the AI connector, I can simply ask the question. As long as the information exists within my ERP, I will very quickly get a response back through the AI agent to the answer to my question. Simply by asking it. So I don't have to go and build a report. I don't have to do any of that. I can just go ahead and ask the question. And as long as the data exists, I will get the answer. And we'll see some of that interaction a little bit later. The other piece that can be certainly helpful, especially to people that are working remote or in a field worker capacity, is the ability to use mobile voice and image interaction. So the connector does support that mobile access. Using voice commands and image recognition can really help folks that are out in the field that are needing to interact with NetSuite. We'll see some examples of that a little bit later. And then, of course, that conversational transaction management we've been talking about is that we can actually create and edit transactions through conversational commands. So we'll see some examples of this as well. And what that really is going to do is enable the streamlining of workflows and reducing manual entry within the system. So we've got some specific examples around that a little bit later. And then the business process automation that it enables, that natural language commands enables users to initiate and control business processes simply by using that natural language, obviously improving efficiency and reducing training needs as well. So some of the advantages are pretty obvious as we start looking at this in more detail, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of light bulbs turning on and a little bit later in the presentation as you start seeing some of the examples that we put forth. But first and foremost is that mobile intelligence. If we're going to be out in the field using mobile devices to scan things like barcodes or even business cards, we can instantly record that data within NetSuite and access that data and create that information. We'll see an example of that a little bit later. And what we like to call is democratizing access throughout the organization. So all users can now perform complex queries without needing to know SQL or having some specific reporting knowledge or how to create save searches in the system. All that kind of gets set to the wayside because I can just ask questions, and as long as the data exists, I can get the information out that I need. So that really reduces your reliance on IT and really encouraging a data-driven culture. Obviously, improved operational speed. Users can execute multiple operations via simple conversations, speeding up those workflows and reducing screen navigation and processing time. And then that natural language interface we've been calling out multiple times is really that interface lowers the training needs and technical barriers. So as a for instance, you'll see this in some instances, you may not even have to log into your NetSuite environment formally. You may not actually have to click a button. You may not necessarily have to even know how to create a transaction, a PO or a transfer. You can just tell the AI connector to do it and then see the result of the behavior. So those are just kind of the overviews. Just one quick note on the questions. I do see some questions coming through on the chat. We're going to try and answer as many questions at the end of the presentation as we possibly can. Anybody that we cannot get to before our time is up today, we'll just reach out to you directly and answer any questions that we're not able to get to. So thank you very much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt. He's going to take you through really get underneath what the NetSuite AI Connector really is. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Matt Dahse. Thank you for joining me today here. Let's go to the big question. What is this? We've tried to give you
Did we lose Matt? Matt, you still there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Got you now. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm not on video because my internet is shaky. Hopefully this holds us through. We are, so the MCP sample tools suite app is available. It is free. You can install it today in your NetSuite account, regardless of whether or not you are on the new release. It provides some basic tools that you can use with this. We also can create custom tools, or developers can create custom tools for you to access your NetSuite. But what is a tool? That's the big question. So a tool is really just a script inside of NetSuite that accepts a specific kind of request from an AI model. In this case, right now it's Claude, that performs some task in NetSuite and informs Claude of the result. So that may not mean much to you, but you know now it is a script. So let's look at an example of how this works. In this diagram, we have a human user on the far left, Claude stands in the middle, and then NetSuite's on the far right. And between Claude and NetSuite, I've got two tools that have been implemented. Think of them as MCP tools. They each do a specific thing. The top tool runs custom SuiteQL, as the title would suggest, and that would get information out of NetSuite. Claude knows how to use that because the tool tells Claude how to use it. There's also a tool on the bottom called Create New Vendor, a different tool that does a different task. You can imagine what it does. So here's an example of a conversation between the human user and Claude. We start off with the user asking Claude about a vendor. The user says, do we have a vendor called Tech Supply Company? Claude thinks about that, understands the request, and prepares to search. It looks at what tools it has available, and it says, oh, I do have a tool that I can check NetSuite and see if I can answer the user's question. So it runs that tool. NetSuite then responds with its response after it runs the SuiteQL, runs the query. That's kind of what it might look like under the covers is that select statement right there, looking for Tech Supply. NetSuite then tells the tool that there's no vendor. Claude gets a response back and says, okay, there's no vendor found. What would you like me to do? Would you like me to create it? The human user then decides whether or not to create it. So he'll say, yes, please create Tech Supply as a vendor. And now Claude says, okay, I have a new task. Do I have a tool that can do that? It looks and finds that it does have a Create New Vendor tool. So it calls that, pushing in the data it knows so far. Company name is Tech Supply Company, and status is active. It doesn't know much more than that. Hopefully that's enough for NetSuite. NetSuite then creates it and responds back to the tool saying that we've created then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Claude lets the user know this has been done. Okay, so that was like the slow motion diagrammed approach. Let me show you how this looks like in real life. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, we are looking at Claude right now. My name is Matt Dahse, so wherever you see this icon that says MD, that's me prompting Claude. Okay, NetSuite symbol is right here, as you can see under my mouse. Whenever you see that symbol, that's Claude calling a tool. So here's where we start. First of all, I said, give me a financial performance report for 2025 Q1 from NetSuite, please, and include some visualizations. I'm using Claude Opus 4.1, which is a really robust model, and you can actually look and see what its thought process is right here on how it's trying to help me. So it's thinking to itself. The user, that's me, is asking for a financial performance report, and it tries to break out that task. What can I do to solve this? First, I need to get financial performance data, and it's trying to define when is Q1. And then it also points out that I asked for a visualization in the report. And it notices right here, it does have a NetSuite function called Get Financial Performance. So this is one of the tools that's been exposed to within my NetSuite account to do a certain thing. If I click here, I can show you all the tools that I have exposed inside NetSuite can do all these specific things. It will call these tools whenever it thinks it needs to go find information out of NetSuite that tool can help. So in this one, Get Financial Performance is built specifically for this task. So it calls that tool, and it created this report. Which looks very cool. Just the sort of thing that I needed. But I actually, turns out, have another ask for it. Taking all this data that is given me out of NetSuite, I then said, create a presentation deck from this report using these visualizations. And Claude, being the highly advanced model that it is, ran all of these other tools, not inside NetSuite, but inside its own model, that actually created a PowerPoint presentation. It will eventually load. Right here. I can download this and apply a template to it if I want to, copy and paste these slides into a larger deck. Right away, I've made 2 prompts to Claude, and I've just done a great deal of work. So this is an example of a read-only operation. All I did was get information out of NetSuite, and I only used one tool to do it, Get Financial Performance. Now, if you're watching this, you might be thinking, well, how does it know that I have permission to see financial performance? And that's a great question. So this tool operates under my user account. So when I configured this tool in Claude, I had to tell it, I had to first log into my NetSuite as an MCP user, the special role that I created, and connect. And it's going to use this MCP user's permissions to carry out any of these tools. If I don't have permissions during my role, in that role, I won't see the tool that does that thing. If I don't have permission to create contacts, this create contact tool won't even be visible to me. So there is, we are honoring the roles that you define in NetSuite for each user. So users approaching this from Claude can't do things they couldn't normally do in the UI. Let's look at another example here. This one is actually one of my favorite examples. I gathered up all the business cards I had within arm's reach of my desk and threw them on the desk and took a picture with my phone and launched the Claude app on my phone. I don't know if you can see these very well, but there are 4 business cards. This is what we in the industry call unstructured data. They are very, very random. Like there's very few things that are in common about these business cards. Some of them have persons' names on them, some of them don't. Some of them have email addresses, others don't. They all seem to have phone numbers, but in this case, the phone number is written in pen. This person printed the cards and then changed phone numbers and had to update other cards with the old-fashioned pen and ink style. So I took a picture of this, and then I gave Claude the prompt on my phone. I said, I collected these business cards at last night to make sure, can you check if these companies are in NetSuite as customers or leads? Here we really see the power of the AI model because it's taking that picture data and it's extracting all the information on those cards. It did a search for each one of these companies. It used the search customer tool. And it did some pretty thorough searching because you see here, it looked for security title, and then it tried without agency, just in case it was entered that way. So security title agency might not be full company name, but it couldn't find it that way either. So it found no matches in NetSuite. So then it asked me, it gave me the information here that it extracted, but it notes that there appears to have a phone number on the card. But it didn't seem to get that phone number. So I asked it, can you read the handwritten number on the painter's card? So it tried, and if you look at its thought processes, it doesn't seem very sure. Now, back in the early days of AI, and here it is, and that's the truth. But thanks to improvements in the models, we're now seeing a little bit less confidence. So it says, I can see there's a handwritten number. The number appears to be this. However, I want to be cautious about my reading of handwritten text. The lighting and angle make it challenging. Would you double check that number to make sure I read it correctly before I add to NetSuite? So the human in the loop, that's me. Again, I jump in here and I look at my business card and I say, no, that's definitely 5161. So I'm reading it right there. I'll read that right back in. Then he thanks me for the correction and he updates his data. I say he because I think Claude is probably a he. I don't know. Then it asks me if I want to add in these new leads. I say yes. It then creates some leads. It has some errors that it has to correct, and then I have to go check and see what those errors are, and eventually correct the error. But that's just one way that you can use the image processing power to interface with NetSuite. Here's another example of how we can use an MCP tool in NetSuite. In this case, we play the role of a customer service agent who just picks up the phone and is talking to Sarah Duncan, who wants to talk about her support case. Can you help me look up her information? So instead of going into NetSuite and trying to find Sarah Duncan, trying to find who she is or what the what the problem is, we use AI to do that, and it uses a tool called Lookup Entities, try to find Sarah Duncan. Doesn't find her. So then she looks again and says, oh, I see her as Sarah W. Duncan from Spectrum I. Here is her details. Then she pulls up her support cases. There's a get support cases tool. And here you can see under the covers, Claude goes and finds the support case, finds the data was created, finds some information about it, and gives it back to me. Then I'm asking, okay, see if you can find a replacement order, because I'm on the phone with her and she's saying something about the status of a replacement order. So we get the case history with another tool. Claude actually accesses that tool and says, okay, let's look at the emails around this case. And we see that Sarah reported, that there was a missing product in her shipment. And our response from Alex Wolf was that they were entering a replacement order that day, and Sarah should receive a tracking number within 2 business days. And then it does a get sales order call to see if it can find this replacement order. Now, all this, remember, is just for me asking if we've got a replacement order. So it's gone deeper to figure out where this is. Then it found a replacement order by Alex Wolf, and it's pending fulfillment. And then it gives me an important note. The replacement order was created September 18th, which when I generated this was a week ago, but it's still showing pending fulfillment, meaning it hasn't shipped yet. Alex told Sarah she should receive the tracking number within 2 business days, but since now it's September 25th, order hasn't been fulfilled. This is likely why Sarah is calling. At this point, I probably need to contact Alex and figure out where that order is. But up until here, you'll notice that my user didn't have to have any kind of NetSuite training to find out all the information for Sarah. Let's do another scenario, okay? This one's fun. Again, we used this tool to actually search NetSuite and then inject information into NetSuite. We created companies and leads. Here was really just looking up information for Sarah, so there was no injection of information. And here is another one where we're going to do a little bit of both. Can you check my NetSuite account and see if there are any pending fulfillment status B sales orders that have back-ordered items? So it does that. It does the get sales order with filters. It looks. It didn't find anything there, so it tried to use a different approach. It used SuiteQL. It found some pending fulfillment orders, and then it did some further, SuiteQL and investigated some more and look at what's back ordered on those orders. It double checked to make sure, and by the time it comes back to me, it's got some great summary information on the back ordered items. It found some limitations, probably due to its permissions, but it still gave me the right information that I wanted. I told it to focus on high quality back orders first. Actually, I didn't tell it that, it decided to do that. I asked what is the item and sales location that is the highest back order quantity. So here it is, it's thinking about all those things. It's rerunning some SuiteQL to get the right information, and it comes back with these highest back order quantities. We've got 2 items here, these 2 hats. And there are other significant back orders back here that are of lesser quantities. Okay, and it says the location with the highest back orders is Boston, 02. And the item is this one and that one. Then I said, of these, which of these items would have the biggest revenue impact if we were to resolve the back order based on the sales order amount for the back ordered lines? Right? It runs some more analysis in the background using these same tools, and it comes back with this recommendation, this one right here. By far the biggest revenue impact at $100,000, representing nearly 2.5x more revenue than the next highest item. This order has been pending for a long time, so addressing this would be great for the Boston location. Then I asked who the preferred vendor is for that item. It did some searching, and it actually had to think pretty hard about this because this is an assembly item in our system, and we don't purchase it typically. However, this being AI smart enough to figure out that we don't typically purchase it, but we can recommend that this contract manufacturer we could purchase it from because they have 4 purchase orders for a similar camouflage cap item, and they probably have, likely has the capability and experience to produce this item. And it gave me an alternate vendor if that one doesn't work out as well, because they also sell a lot of hat items. Okay. I told it to create a purchase order that covers our back order for the order's location. So it used another tool called to create PO for item. It knows already what the ID is, what the quantity is that we need to cover the back order, who the vendor ID is that we recommend, and the location, which is Boston. That's all it needs to know to create a purchase order, and it did. Here's the response that came back from NetSuite, gave me a purchase order number, and it tells me now, here's the purchase order number. It's been created. This is pending receipt, but because I don't have an approval process set up in my account for this sort of thing. So all I had to do now was contact the vendor, send them the PO, and hopefully wait for my back order to be relieved. I decided to have a little fun with it after this, and I just said, based on the current historical demand, how many units should you plan on purchasing for the next quarter? And it ran a process, and based on our history in my demo account, it said we don't need to buy any more. Our current purchase order is sufficient. I have no other back orders, and history isn't robust enough on this item to justify another purchase. Then I asked it to show me a bar graph with the back-ordered items represented by this sales amount, which it did. It gave me a really nice bar graph here that I could use to justify this if anybody asked me why I placed this order. So that was pretty cool. We actually did some research, we did some analysis, and then we created a transaction without ever having to need to log in NetSuite. If you are more AI forward and you're using AI as a thought partner during your day-to-day operations, this is a good use case because most of this happens outside of NetSuite except for the final piece of it. So I played the role of someone who's looking for a vendor to buy fire extinguishers for the Boston office. And I had the research button toggled on this one, which allows Claude to just comb the web and find the answers to really deep, hard questions like that. But before it even did that, it recognized that it needed more information from me. What's the approximate size of my office space? Do you need just the fire extinguishers? You need installation, inspection, and maintenance. What's your approximate budget? These are all good questions that I really hadn't thought about before I plugged in the prompt. But having given this feedback, I gave it what it wanted. I told it was a medium-sized office, how many workers, and my budget was right around $2,500. And I told it I would need installation services and maintenance. So then it went and did research. It took 10 minutes to do this research, during which time I walked away, got some coffee, whatever. But it checked with NFPA.org, mass.gov, OSHA.gov, boston.gov, looking for regulations and codes to figure out what kind of fire extinguishers my fictional office would need, which was amazing. And then it gave me this report that told me what I need. I didn't even bother reading this. I said, well, okay, Claude knows what this is. So based on your research, can you recommend 2 potential vendors? So it did some research and found out those vendors, Fire Equipment Inc. and Mass Fire Extinguishers. And it recommended Mass Fire Extinguishers, and it has reasons why it recommended. So I said, add Mass Fire Extinguishers as a vendor can you add them to my NetSuite account? Which it then did. It used create vendor to create this vendor in my account. It looked up information on the web to populate its phone number and other information that it needed. And then I asked, do we have enough information available about their catalog or items in the market to create some item records for fire extinguishers that we will likely purchase? It didn't, but I said, well, try searching sites like Grainger or Amazon to get some good sample items, and we can adjust based on what the vendor has later. So it then did some more research. It took another 7 minutes and 45 seconds. It searched Amazon, Grainger, Home Depot, a bunch of other places. And it came up with a few products that we're going to need. And I said, please list these products for me. So it did. Gave me the SKUs, the UPCs, and the price ranges. It recommended, based on what the municipal codes are, that I get these pieces, 3 or 4 units, brackets, a signage, and an IP or a CO2 for server IP. So I said, please create item records for the items mentioned in your recommended configuration. And it just created a whole bunch of inventory items for me. And then I said, draft an email to the vendor requesting a quote. That's the email that it put together for me right there. I told it to update the draft with my name, my title, email address, all that sort of thing. It claimed to do that. And I said to send the email. And it reached into NetSuite. Wow. So it didn't have their email address. I said, I've updated the email address for this vendor, so I went to NetSuite and updated it. So you should be able to send this out by adding the vendor internal ID as the recipient. And then it called the send email from NetSuite tool to send it out. So that was pretty amazing. And just the last example I have for you today is I told Claude that I just met Chris Millet from Moss Adams, and he seemed interested in learning more about our services. Can you look up some contact information about Chris and Moss Adams and create a new lead in my NetSuite if Chris has a contact? I had research mode turned on, and this thing crawled all over Chris Millet's background, did a full background check with 131 sources, tried to find everything it could about Moss Adams and Chris Millet. I'm not going to hang on to this on the screen too long, but this is all pretty accurate. This is Chris Millet, this is Moss Adams, and it even mentions Baker Tilly's merger. Moss Adams represents it recently completed a transformative merger with Baker Tilly in June, so that's also true. Interesting. And again, I just told it to create a lead and create a contact within my NetSuite. So using Claude as an AI partner, I found out what I needed to know about Chris Millet, added into my NetSuite, and now I can move on with my day. Those are the real-life demos that we had prepared for you. I'm going to stop sharing. How does this fit into the bigger picture? NetSuite is coming out with something called the NetSuite Advisor, which will be sort of an in-app chatbot that you'll be able to access within NetSuite. You'll probably learn much more about this if you're attending Suite World or in the coming months. But we got a little bit of a preview of it, and it looks pretty amazing. It's going to have some contextual information inside NetSuite. It's not using Claude. It's using another model that NetSuite is hosting, Oracle is hosting. Don't know much about it yet. but we can almost be assured that if you have these tools created, which will create vendors and create contacts and things like that, you will likely have access to these tools in that internal chatbot as well. So we know this because there is a sort of little configuration when you're writing these things to expose them to external tools, implying that there's also going to be an internal tool. I think that's NetSuite Advisor. Safe harbor always applies, of course. I'm speculating on that, but I think it's a pretty good bet that we're going to see these sorts of tools exposure in NetSuite. These are part of an AI-centric workflow. We're moving toward a day when you're not necessarily going to be interacting with individual applications as much. You're going to give instructions to an agent who is going to coordinate information between your systems. NetSuite's AI Connector, you've seen that today. It's what we've been talking about so far, but it's only one of just dozens already out there. I'm going to show, here's what was there a few days ago. If you're at all tuned into the business world, you know that there are hundreds or thousands of other applications that are fighting right now to put themselves on this list. Claude already talks to all these other systems. One of these, is like Zapier right there at the bottom at the end. And you'll notice that, and Workato is in there too. So these are gateway sort of middleware applications that talk to other applications. So we're talking about probably hundreds or thousands of applications that are already exposing tools that can talk to Claude, allowing Claude to do business on your behalf. That was all the good stuff. Now let's talk about some of the challenging things that are in front of us with this technology. The first is documentation challenges. There's no polite way to put this, but NetSuite often pushes stuff out when it's not quite fully baked. We often get they're in a hurry to produce a good application or a plugin like this, but they haven't done the work to really document how it all works and make it very clear to those that are building these tools. So for right now, the lack of comprehensive guides forces a lot of trial and error during implementation. I can tell you from experience, it wasn't easy to build the tools that we displayed today. They were challenging, and mostly because we just didn't know enough about how they work. There's a UI safeguard law. So often when you're interacting with NetSuite, you can see things like the color of the interface. It tells you that you're in sandbox or production maybe. Or you can look up in the upper right and see what role you're in. Or you'll get a pop-up that will warn you that you shouldn't be doing this because we have a safeguard in place there. You're not going to get those cues when you're working in Claude, obviously. So something to be aware of. And we'll go into more of these, in more depth on each one of these. Data privacy concerns. If you know anything about the AI industry, they are hungry for data. They will consume any data that you let slip. Any data that's not nailed down, they're going to use it to train their models. And that includes the chats that you're giving, you're interacting with Claude, and the data that's coming back in those chats. So you're concerned about any of that data being used to train future models. You should be aware of what your options are there to lock that down. And then, of course, there are poor admin controls right now. We'll go into more on that in a few minutes. But basically, it's another symptom of NetSuite pushing this out before it's quite all the way ready. So if you're an admin, you have a number of controls you're used to having at your fingertips for scripts, and you're not going to have those right out of the gate with these MCP tools. So let's go into a little bit more depth on this. Documentation challenge, again, very young feature. And we anticipate that as more and more people are tinkering with this, more more suite help articles are going to come out, and there's going to be more support for this. It'll be easier and easier to implement these. But right now, it does impact your implementation cost and the quality. You're going to have a lot of trial and error to make this work. We talked about UI safeguard loss, visual cues like pop-ups, mandatory field indicators, page ribbons are missing. So if you depend on those, you have to put those warnings into the tools if you need them. Poor admin controls. This one is near and dear to my heart. Like the custom tool script doesn't really exist in the UI. And that means there's no way to check any logs for these custom tools in NetSuite. There's no mechanism in the UI to disable a custom tool. There's no way to define an audience for a tool and say, I only want these people to be able to use this tool, other than just raw permissions. And lastly, there's no clear way to list all custom tools that might be deployed in an account. This is a big one to me. It's like if I'm an admin, I need to know what tools are out there. Right now, you pretty much have to take a developer's word for it. There's no way to really check and see what tools have been deployed there. So that's definitely a risk until that gap is covered. Again, I anticipate that this problem will be addressed, but it's not addressed yet. So be aware you're in the Wild West if you implement this right away. Data privacy concerns. Legally, chats are retained for 30 days on Claude servers. They can be retained for longer, and they can be used to train future versions of the models unless you are on a higher paid tier, like an enterprise tier. You can then opt out of that. You can, at an individual level, also opt out, but that means all of your users will have to not only opt out, they also need to be careful not to use certain behaviors. For instance, when a response comes back from Claude, if you hit the up or down thumbs to say you like or don't like it, it takes that as an implicit permission to save that whole chat and use that feedback to correct its models for future versions. So be very aware of that. Of course, other AI models, when they become supported, they're going to have their own data retention policies you'll have to be aware of. Best practices around this, strategic implementation criteria. So less is more, right? Adopt the AI connector with strong technical skills, use clear use cases and risk management frameworks. Risk mitigation, there are certain things you can do to mitigate your risk when you implement this. And be aware that right now deployment timing and costs are going to be pretty high because, again, that documentation just isn't there yet. It's a very, very young technology and people don't know what they're doing. So until some experience materializes out there in the field, be aware that it's going to take a little time. Best practices, you want to control this by role. I mentioned that you should only grant MCP server permission to very limited roles. AI tools are constrained by normal NetSuite permissions. So if you don't give that role permission to do a thing in NetSuite, it won't be able to do that thing in NetSuite. An AI-enabled role might be more locked down than a UI role. It's probably a good idea because you don't really know until you've played with it for a while what the AI is going to try and do to try to keep the user appeased. They could be asking for things that they're confusing the AI about. You want to control the available tools. So develop tools that only do a specific thing. ensure the tools don't expose information you don't want exposed in a future data breach, and consider using links to NetSuite records to help users rather than exposing raw record data to the AI. What I mean by that is, instead of saying, go look up this sales order and tell me about it, you write a tool that says, give me a link to the sales order, I will click it, which navigates me in the NetSuite UI to that sales order. And now Claude doesn't have any real data about the sales order except what his ID was, right? So that's the sort of thing that can really keep your data locked down. Limit the number of users that you expose to this. One thing that AI can do really well is lift up the junior most staff into the competency ladder above them. So it sort of artificially adds more skill to junior staff. Senior staff don't get as much benefit out of AI unless they are a power user. You really need more AI skills to realize benefits if you're already very, very good at your job. And not every user or role is a good candidate. Training and interacting with LLM is useful. So this is a little bit of prompt engineering, just knowing how to talk to an AI and recognizing when an AI is wrong. A lot of people, when they first start using AI, they get frustrated because the AI is often goes off on their own path and they can't guide it back to the right path. They're used to working with computers where the computer's always right. And in this case, the computer is just kind of like another human. It can often be wrong. So training is a big deal. Finally, trust the experts. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Chris.
Yeah, thanks very much, Matt. A lot of questions in the QA chat, so we'll get to those here in a few minutes. But I think a couple of main takeaways from our presentation today is what we're really intended for is to really show, there's a lot of interesting and quite frankly, some really cool things that we can do with this technology. But at the same time, it is fairly immature in terms of documentation, in terms of information around how to control access to data. And so we just wanted to, other than just showing all the neat things that people get excited about, is really make sure that you're talking with folks that really know about things like AI strategy, AI governance, data governance, before you jump in with both feet. Right? If you're not sure how this technology can best help you, then really talk to folks out there that do. And so here at Baker Tilly, we have an entire team. Obviously, Matt and I are both on the NetSuite team, and so we're very interested, invested in that development around how we can best use these tools and help our clients use these tools. But in addition to that, here we have an entire team that all they do is consult around AI. So things around AI engineering, AI governance, compliance around that. And again, so we want to make sure that folks are making wise decisions. They have all of the correct information in front of them before, again, we just jump in haphazardly and without all of the information needed to make a good decision around that. So you can reach out to either myself and or Matt if you have further questions or would like to talk to some of our experts around this information. But with that, we'll go ahead and jump into some questions. So Matt, I'll go ahead and fire these off to you. You've done most of the research around most of this. Some of this we may not have an answer to, but we'll do some research and get back to those that we don't currently have an answer to. But the first question that I have here, Matt, is does each user need to have a Claude license?
Yes, every user is going to have a paid Claude license to take advantage of this tool. Yeah, that's an easy question.
Yeah, that was the first one. It's pretty easy. The next question is, we may not have an answer to, is do we have a rough date for support of OpenAI LLM?
So we don't. In fact, the idea that OpenAI LLM will be supported is even speculation. So a safe harbor definitely applies here. We got common sense tells us we're definitely going to see support for ChatGPT and those models, but you're not going to get that answer even from NetSuite yet. They're not ready. ChatGPT did just announce that they're supporting the MCP protocol, which is a step in the right direction, but right now they don't support the kind of authentication that NetSuite needs in order to hook this in.
Great.
Great question.
Next question is, can we build agents in Claude to perform repetitive tasks, i.e. if I wanted to have a report, have it send me a report each day of whatever topic?
You can, but you generally have to use some third-party platform to hit Claude's API to do that. That could be Workato, that could be Make.com, it could be Soligo, it could be any number of platforms out there that can do that. I think I would probably maybe even do it with if this, then that, or something like that. So yes and no. It can be done, but it's going to involve a little bit more software.
Got it. Does it put together anything on the suite builder side of things? Do you know?
Does it put together? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Are you asking about like custom records or custom fields? Can you get information about those things? To the degree that you can pull that information out of Suite Analytics, then yes. I guess I don't really understand the goal of that.
Well, maybe we can follow with that one after our time here, Matt, and just follow up with the person who asked that question directly, just to get a little bit more context, maybe. Next question we have is Claude part of MCP, or is it a separate add-on?
So Claude is a separate service built by Anthropic. Anthropic is the one who designed the MCP protocol. NetSuite implemented that protocol, and that's why they're the first provider. You have to have a NetSuite account, and you have to have a Claude account in order to use these two things together. Hope that answers the question.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I think we may have answered a few of these questions, at least to a certain extent, but the question is really about security, Matt. And the question is, what about security of the data Claude now has access to? We are essentially giving Claude full access to our company data within NetSuite. How is that security risk mitigated? And we did cover some of this in the presentation.
Yeah, so you're only giving Claude access to whatever the tools output. Claude doesn't have direct access to NetSuite. Claude has access to tools, and you have control over what tools you provide. So if you don't want to provide a tool that gives a user abilities to get financial information, then Claude will never see your financial information. So there are tools that mitigate this. We've got some publications that are coming out a little bit later that go deeper about this, but there are some backstops to keep all your data from being exfiltrated from NetSuite. That's not a danger here. What the danger is, you accidentally exposing things you don't want to by giving a tool too much access to the information, giving too much permission to the users using that tool, et cetera.
Got it.
I hope that helps.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. And with our last minute here, got a couple more questions. The financial deck that was created, and I'm assuming we're referring to some of the graphs and output that we saw there during your demo, Matt. Is that a pre-built design as part of the tool, or is it a unique deck each time we prompt Claude for a deck? Is something like Kanban, which we saw that as one of the connector platforms used in the background to create the visualizations, baked into the tool?
So that's baked into Claude, but every time you ask Claude, it's going to give you slightly different output, just like a person. So you can definitely arrange your prompt to tell it to use a particular color scheme, to focus on this data point rather than that data point. The theme is going to look fairly similar, but you have some control over that as well. So every time that you ask that information from Claude, it's going to be a little bit different.
Great, thanks. We're right at time here. We do have a couple more questions. We will follow up with those folks directly after the presentation, but I will turn it back over to Emily and Alex to close us out.
All right. Thank you, Chris and Matt, for a great presentation today. As Chris was saying, if we didn't have time to answer your questions, we'll be doing our best to follow up with you after the webcast. And here is a link to an online survey where you can provide feedback for today's presentation. Please take a moment to complete this survey, as your feedback is very important to us. Please also visit mossadams.com for future webcasts and other resources to help elevate your performance. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time.